Okay, so this is take two on this podcast called Mr. K is Wrong. And this episode is called Taxing the Rich Myths, Realities, and Economic Inequality. So, who is Mr. K? I always have to introduce him every time. He's somebody that I used to know way back in my high school days. I got along with him reasonably well, and that was despite him being conservative leaning and me not being that way. But over the years, he's gone further and further down a far right rabbit hole, and he's been posting bonkers things on Facebook. And, I've started this podcast to debunk a lot of it. And one of the previous episodes was so extreme that I had to bring in some former neo Nazis to debunk one of his anti Semitic memes that he posted. So yeah, it's something that is pretty disheartening, that somebody that I used to know was posting something that two former neo Nazis agreed was indeed Nazi like or Nazi adjacent, however you want to look at it. Fortunately, this particular meme that I'm talking about today, it's not quite as extreme. It's actually more like a traditional conservative take on taxes. Oh, those poor rich folks. We need to shed a bunch of tears over them, an endless stream of tears for those poor overtaxed rich people. And we cry so much about them that we could create a massive river of tears that is powerful and large enough that Noah would have needed to build an ark for it. And you could get a motorboat out there and go water skiing, you know, on this immense river or lake of tears for these poor, overburdened, overtaxed rich folks. But anyway, what's the meme in question? Well, it shows a cartoon caricature of Kamala Harris saying, "I'll make the rich pay their fair share." And there's another cartoon woman sitting across from her saying, "It says here the top 5% paid 66% of all federal income tax. So what would be a fair share?" And that's supposed to be funny, I guess. Um, it wasn't. I wasn't slapping my knee out of laughter with that one. Like, ha ha ha, that was so funny. No, no, it wasn't funny at all. And I decided to do an episode on this, and I consulted the handy dandy Chat GPT, both out of laziness, but also because if Chat GPT can debunk the meme and its talking points, well, then it's probably not a very accurate or factual claim, and it's probably a crappy meme, right? So anyway, here's what ChatGPT said, and it goes pretty in depth here. It said this meme attempts to oversimplify the complex issue of tax fairness by suggesting that because the top 5% of income earners pay 66% of federal income taxes, they are already paying more than their fair share. So here's a breakdown to debunk this idea. ChatGPT says, so, number one, the top 5% earn a disproportionate share of income. Now, that is definitely true. That's what makes them rich by definition, right? So, it continues, while it's true that the wealthiest Americans pay a significant portion of federal income taxes, they also earn a disproportionately large share of the nation's total income. For example, the top 5% of income earners control a vastly larger percentage of national income compared to the bottom 95%. According to IRS data, the top 5% of households earned around 35% of all income in the US. This concentration of wealth means they should and do pay more taxes. So, wow, how about that? And what about point number two, federal income tax versus the total tax burden. So ChatGPT continues, the meme focuses solely on federal income taxes, ignoring other forms of taxation. Wealthy Americans often pay lower effective tax rates on other types of income, such as capital gains, dividends, and investments, which are taxed at lower rates than wages. And of course, a lot of Americans barely even know what capital gains, dividends, or investments are, or how to go about doing that. Either because, they would rather work at a wage earning job, or they're of course just not educated enough, or any number of things. There can be philosophical reasons or just lack of opportunity style reasons, but there's definitely a big difference there. So it continues. It says, in addition, when considering state and local taxes, payroll taxes, and sales taxes, the tax burden on low and middle income Americans becomes much higher relative to their income. So that's true. That's why a lot of these conservative these Republican types, they will act as if they're radicals, who are just trying to stick it to the man or whatever. But actually, at the end of the day, they are the man, and I think a lot of people actually do know that out there. They're not all suckers. But unfortunately, a lot of the American voting public are suckers, so they actually buy into this myth that Republicans are just like they're like rebels or something like that. But actually, what they do is they cater to the rich. They suck up to the rich and the well connected. And but more than anything else, what they cater to is the tradition of letting the rich gain more and more money and power, while ordinary people have less and less access to resources, decision making, and just a lot of opportunities are sapped away when it doesn't really have to be that way. But that's how things are set up, and the media likes to prop things up that way. Makes it seem like, oh, actually these rich people they're the poor victims, and like the homeless people, screw them. They're evil. They're all the criminals. They're all criminally insane. And like they demonize immigrants endlessly. So like if somebody is a poor immigrant coming from you know Mexico or something, they'll make it seem like they're, well, Hannibal Lecter is what Donald Trump is constantly bringing up. Like he's trying to associate them with like cannibalism, I guess. But really, it's a divide and conquer style game, and the whole thing with they're eating the dogs and cats, that was another freakish claim, and that's really an old racist trope. And Donald Trump has now said that he's planning to deport the Haitian immigrants living in Springfield, Ohio, even though they are actually legally there. You know, that's something that J.D. Vance tried to, just shrug off, and you say, no, they're not legally there, but they are. They follow the rules. They are there legally. So to, like demonize them for it is, well, it's dishonest. It's actually kind of evil, and it's factually incorrect. That's one of the important things to note with all of this. So there's this divide and conquer game that's been going it's been going on since, well, it's probably had roots going way back to the origins of human history, of course, but um you could just say that it's an ancient tradition, I guess. But anyway, let's see, where was I? Oh, yes. Point number 3, tax deductions and loopholes. So ChatGPT continues, while the wealthy pay a higher share of federal income taxes, they also have access to numerous tax deductions, credits, and loopholes that can significantly lower their tax burden. This allows some of the wealthiest individuals to pay a much lower effective tax rate than the official tax brackets suggest. So I don't really have any snappy comments on that because that's like, that's more in the weeds, I guess you might say. But I'll just say that boo hoo hoo, these poor tax people, these poor overtaxed rich people, that's that's really what my argument's going to come down to with that one. So 4.4 is about progressive taxation. ChatGPT says the US has a progressive tax system where higher income individuals pay a higher percentage of their income taxes. This principle is designed to ensure fairness since wealthier individuals have greater financial capacity to contribute to public services and infrastructure. The idea being making the rich pay their fair share often relates to closing loopholes, raising taxes on extreme wealth, and addressing income inequality. So, now a point I meant to raise earlier was about, you know, uh, some of these Republicans, you might think they're like tax abolitionists, but actually the vast majority of them are still in favor of taxation. So it's a bit like a little bait and switch there, because obviously anarchist types or left wing radicals could also be in favor of maybe abolishing taxes, in the same way that a conservative might argue for it. But what they want to do actually is, in a lot of cases, these people want these far right Republican types, they don't want to abolish taxes. They want to have a national sales tax, which just massively shifts the tax burden onto ordinary Americans. And that's supposed to be like the rebellious, cool thing. Whereas, like if it was up to me, and we were going to actually abolish taxes and yada yada yada, I would advocate for more of a society that's you know based on worker and consumer control of resources and decision making, because that's really what logically follows if you want a society that actually functions without paying taxes. But instead of being like radical and cool, the Republicans just want to shift the tax burden. So there's really not any sort of actual revolution here. It's just more of the same bull crap. Only, the average Americans are getting screwed over even harder. So yeah, fun times. So moving on to point five, that's about income inequality and the social contract. So ChatGPT says the fair share argument goes beyond just income tax percentages. It addresses the broader question of economic inequality and whether the wealthiest Americans are contributing enough to support the system from which they benefit. And they sure do. I'm going to interject here. Look at a lot of what's his name? Oh yeah, the elongated muskrat. He gets a lot of not just tax breaks and stuff like that and tax cuts, but he's getting actual tax money for a lot of his projects. And what Elon Musk likes to do, it's a proven fact that he was born rich. For one thing, he came from a wealthy family, but he likes to sort of attach himself to these projects that he didn't actually invent. Like PayPal would be an example. Obviously, Tesla is another. And he attaches his name to those things, and Twitter. And he has sort of a habit of running them into the ground, And for example, he's apparently kicked out of Twitter, or not Twitter, but uh, PayPal is what I meant to say. But his name was still attached to that. He obviously did have something to do with it. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he wasn't involved at all. But he got booted from it. And if you're such a successful, genius businessman, I don't think you would get booted from so many things. You'd be able to communicate effectively. And really just look at what he's done with Twitter. Like, all he had to do with Twitter was just add an edit function and basically just shut the hell up and leave it alone. it would have been mostly fine. But in fact, he's destroyed its reputation and he's destroyed its branding. That's one of the most obvious things that Elon Musk has done to screw up Twitter. Even people who like Elon Musk would admit that nobody wants to actually call it X. You know, you can't even brand that because it's a letter. It's a letter of the alphabet. You know, and it's like he thinks it's cool. Like like in the '90s they had all these different things that were attaching the letter X to them because they thought it sounded cool. Well, he must have been a part of that trend or something back then. Like he must have been really think all these products that brand themselves with the letter X are just kick ass or whatever. And he took Twitter, changes its name, ruined its brand. Now nobody even knows what they want to call it because you just can't really call it X. Nobody in their right fucking mind wants to call it X. And there I dropped an F bomb because I get mad thinking about thinking about how stupid it is. But he ruined Twitter. Twitter was already bad enough as it was. Don't get me wrong, but he just made it worse. Now it's like you go in there and there's a bunch of fake profiles that click like on your stuff and they add you as a as an ex pal or whatever the hell they would call them. On Facebook it's just friends. I don't know what Twitter would call or X would call them. You know, and do you call them tweets anymore or excretions maybe? I don't know. I don't know what he's just ruined the whole thing. And I guess the point I was trying to make originally was just that he gets a lot of these benefits actually from the government, just like during the COVID-19 heyday, a lot of these same conservatives who blast poor people for getting handouts. Well, they applied for and got some handouts from the government as well. And when it comes to just government programs in general, you often notice that they ask, well, how are we going to pay for that when it comes to anything that helps the poor and the middle class, whatever. They're like, how are we going to pay for that? But they don't ask that when it comes to our military misadventures and when it comes to police beating people over the head or shooting at them or anything to do with dropping bombs on people or locking them in cages or beating them up. They have no concerns about how that's going to be paid for. That's just like, oh, it's just guaranteed that they're going to be on the same page as anything that is cruel and dehumanizing and violent. That's it's just mind blowing, this double standard. I mean, if you want to have an honest discussion, then you would say, okay, how are we going to pay for all of this stuff? And you would be equally concerned pretty much across the board, right? You know? And really if they're that concerned about, taxes being a burden and everything being a burden, well then it logically follows that at some point they would oppose capitalism in general because guess what? Capitalism itself is a burden. You pay money for goods and services. Um, there's a lot of legal stuff involved in propping up all of these businesses on a global scale. There's there's really a strong argument to be made that capitalism itself is the government, right? Because every aspect of it is entangled in law. So, if they're really like wanting to sound like renegades, well, there you go. That's something they would actually oppose. But in fact, they're not rebels. They're conformists and they're lamos. But anyway, the debate focuses on the balance between economic growth, opportunity, and how to address the challenges faced by those in lower income brackets. That's what ChatGPT concludes regarding income inequality and the social contract. Now, I did an episode on my other podcast called Critical Weight Theory, where I kind of just say that I don't believe in the social contract that much. I think it's too much of a, it's almost too much like a superstitious or religious concept. I just it's kind of icky to me to to say that, oh, there's this invisible contract that you signed just by being in existence on this landmass. It's like, how about you just say, this is what I think is fair and this is what I think is right, rather than conjuring up some hocus pocus about you signed a social contract by being born or whatever. So that would be my little critique of that part of the ChatGPT response. But anyway, ChatGPT does conclude by saying the meme uses selective statistics to imply the rich are overburdened, but it omits critical context such as income distribution, effective tax rates, and the complexities of the tax system. The debate over what constitutes a fair share includes not just how much the wealthy pay in taxes, but how the tax system can be adjusted to ensure economic justice and opportunity for all. So that's a part that I definitely agree with. I think ChatGPT gave a pretty solid response, and it proves that yes, that meme is indeed pretty easy to debunk. And sure, I went on a few tangents here and there, but it made the episode maybe more entertaining, more thought provoking, and less propped up by the ChatGPT response, which I know some of you out there, you hate AI and yada yada yada. But I think it's a solid premise to see, can ChatGPT sort of auto debunk this stuff? And sure enough, to a large degree, it did. But anyway, I'll probably do another episode next week. Same Wade place, same Wade. Well, not the same Wade time, but probably probably next Friday I'll do another episode. So have a holly jolly Christmas.